distinguished ministers, distinguished government representatives, representatives of the intergovernmental organizations, United Nations agencies, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the last session of the day almost. We are very encouraged seeing your interest and keen interest on this topic. I call to order the working session on inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction of the 2017 Global Partnership for Disaster Risk Reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to cordially welcome all of you to this session. This is Abul Kalam Azad, Principal Coordinator of Sustainable Development Goal in Prime Minister's Office, Bangladesh. I am honored to serve as co-chair together with Dr. Natalia Kanen on my right. She is the Deputy Executive Director of our program at UNFPA, who started her career in Johns Hopkins and Columbia University School of Medicine and Public Health and worked with Ford Foundation around the globe. The topic of our deliberation this afternoon is inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. The summary of our discussion today will be reflected in the Global Platform Chairman's summary, which will be presented again at the closing ceremony. The chair's summary of this platform will be submitted to the high-level political forum on sustainable development coming July. We all know this year, during high-level political forum, progress on Sustainable Development Goals 1, that is the poverty, Goal 2, hunger, Goal 3, health, Goal 5, Goal 9, 14, and 17 will be discussed. Before we proceed, my co-chair and I would like to make some introductory remarks on the theme of our discussion today. Here, we will be discussing, as I told, inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. We all know key concept of SDG 2030 is leave no one behind. This tells both about inclusive and people-centered activities. Disaster risk reduction is for the benefit of the people to save the nation and combat harm. If we look towards Bangladesh, cyclone and tidal bore in 1970 killed about 500,000 people. We have developed our capacity, involving the society and motivating them. Now, after 47 years, the same magnitude can at best kill a few. Under Cyclone Preparedness Program, at present, 55,000 volunteers work throughout the coastal line. We engaged 1.6 million youth as disaster volunteer. With community risk assessment, educating the youth through proper curricula, involving local level leaders and government employee, social safety net, we are combating different types of disaster. River erosion, waterlogging in southern part due to rise of sea level, flood and early flood, earthquake, cyclone, drought, we are facing continuously. But we know if there is 100 of risk, at least 101 way to overcome. Maybe Bangladesh is the worst victim, but the whole globe is under threat of climate change and disaster. Through research, capacity building, innovation, sharing resources, involving all sectors, youth, women, child, old, people with special skills, disadvantaged groups, we need to go forward for a better world for our children. Let us work to implement the recommendations of Dhaka Declaration 2015. Thank you. Thank you all. Now, I hand over the floor to my fellow co-chair, Dr. Natalia Kanem, Deputy Executive Director for Program at UNFPA. Dr. Natalia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Azad. I'm delighted to be here with you and with this distinguished set of panelists to say a few words from the perspective of the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, on the very salient issue of inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. There's enormous potential in taking women, youth, people with differently abled perspectives, as we look at the need to lead in action for planning, for pre-positioning, and for swift action when there are threats of crisis from famine, from earthquake, natural or human-made. The accelerated reach of the Sustainable Development Goals demand an emphasis on the sustainability part. And here, the 7 Sendai Framework global targets and the United Nations Plan of Action on Disaster Risk Reduction for Resilience are quite important. This includes, in our view, the understanding that whether in calm or in calamity, when crisis strikes, human activity continues. And this is as true of the sexual and reproductive health needs of people who find themselves caught up in natural disasters worldwide. The thought that has to be given to differently abled people being able to reach and have a plan for their resilience demands imagination, it demands creativity, it demands new approaches to technology, and a focus and an energy. And here, the role of adolescents and young people must also be emphasized. Marginalized groups, all evidence shows us, will be disproportionately affected in times of crisis and humanitarian emergency. And this has to do with pre-existing barriers that they have faced, including lack of access to normal services, and of particular note for us today, lack of access to early warning systems. Hence the emphasis on planning, preparation, and pre-positioning. So inclusivity and putting people at the center, which is part of the Sustainable Development Goals era, implies that we should remove these barriers to exclusion completely, and that we should involve people in the planning who are most affected and who have the deepest understanding of what the barriers are, as well as what the overcoming and the solutions of the barriers would be. The Sendai Framework states that gender, age, disability, cultural, and mobility perspectives all must be redirected into policies and into practices. While there are unique challenges that are faced by every type of marginalized group, the commonalities that exist should be harnessed, and these can be addressed through best practice approaches. Throughout the conference, you will have noted that we have planted reminders of how the presence and the ingenuity of people from so-called marginalized perspectives can be of great value, and the robots, for example, are one example of that. And I would say that in our communities, in our countries, and globally, we need to be deliberate about planting such reminders so that we are continually aware that planning and preparation, collective action, is what we will need to change our perception of so-called vulnerability. Rather than perceiving persons at risk mainly as a burden or as people to be cared for, the understanding about how they have already overcome great challenge and how we can use that talent towards the planetary responsibility that we share is part and parcel of what our working session is about. And my co-chair and I look forward to your active engagement and contribution of your understandings as well. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Dr. Natalia Kanem. She told amongst all about the early preparedness. Now we will see a video on how to prepare in disaster in a family.
Dappled sunlight through trees and a wisteria-covered front porch.
No 2 days are alike,
An older woman sorts her medication.
so every day you prepare.
A woman who is blind feeds her service dog.
For yourself,
She places the bowl on the floor and he eats.
for those you love,
A mother using a wheelchair packs a lunchbox. Her daughter takes it, kisses her, and runs off.
for whatever the day may bring.
A man who is deaf signs to a loved one and departs.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies,
The older woman assembles her kit.
as well as any important documents you may need.
She includes a USB drive.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different.
The man who is deaf stores his kit in the closet.
There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you.
The mother using a wheelchair closes her kit and hugs her daughter. Words on screen.
Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. ready.gov/myplan.
So, prepare from mind. This is a video only for family preparation, but we have other preparations too. Early announcement, preparedness on rescue, infrastructure, and so on. Now, I have the honor to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have a very rich panelist of 4 distinguished personality. First of all, on my left, Ms. Leni N. Rosalin, Deputy Minister for Child Development, Indonesia. She is working From 1994 to 2000, as head of Population Division, Population Bureau Family Planning, role of women and youth. Ms. Lani has a long working experience on women and child protection in Indonesia. Let us welcome Ms. Lani. On her left, Mr. Carlos Kaiser, Executive Director of ONG Inclusiva, Chile. He is the Executive Director of Inclusiva, a DIDRR NGO, and the Chairperson of the DIDRR Network of America, Latina, and the Caribbean. Under Kaiser's management, Inclusiva won the Risk Award 2014, and Kaiser was nominated to the Sasakawa Award 2015. Let us welcome Mr. Kaiser. On the right, after the co-chair, Mr. Rafael Oboeno, External Advisor, UN Habitat's Youth Advisory Board, Kenya. Mr. Rafael is a policy specialist, advocate, and author. He is one of the 2016 UN Persons of the Year and 2015 Most Inspirational African Youth. He is a recipient of Duke University's 2012 Policy Star Award and holds a Master of Public Policy. Let us welcome Mr. Rafael. On his right, Ms. Mary Jack, Provincial Coordinator, Action Aid Vanuatu. Mary Jack has over 10 years' experience working with provincial government. Mary worked at Pacific Institute of Public Policy from 2010 to 2015 to implement a program of political stakeholder engagement in Vanuatu. She is currently the provincial coordinator of Action Aid. Also, we have a remote discussant. We will see him later. He is staying at Washington. From Washington, Mr. Muhammad Ali Loutfi. He will be connected via double robot. So Mr. Loutfi, Executive Director of Disabled People International, Arab Region, and Senior Doctoral Fellow at the AU Institute of Disability and Public Policy.
So we should welcome Mary and the other discussion.
So we welcome all the panelists and discussants. So each of the panelists will speak initially for 3 to 5 minutes. First, I give the floor to the Deputy Minister, Ms. Lani N. Rosalyn, for initial reflection on today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdul Kalam. Distinguished hosts, colleagues, partners, and friends, thank you for inviting me to speak at this important working session on inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. Among others, children and young people are most at risk. So it is important that we understand their circumstances in terms of where they live, in urban or rural, their age group, child, adolescent, or youth, whether they are a boy or girl, whether or not they have a disability, and whether or not they are from a poor family. It is also important to understand this in terms of the skills, knowledge, and resources of children and young people to adapt to their environment and to overcome shocks and stresses, what we call the capacity factors here. When we understand both sides of the coin, vulnerability and capacity, we can help to address these direct and indirect impacts of hazards and avoid disaster. My office, Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection of Indonesia, leads a program called Child Friendly City that works with local government and partners, including children and young people, to identify and monitor how a community is becoming a better place for children and young people by looking at specific indicators such as access to school, health, recreation, etc. There are 24 indicators used to measure the child-friendly city. Since 2015, we have been working to enhance the resilience aspect of the Child-Friendly City program by integrating child-centered climate change and disaster risk assessment. My ministry led a series of focus group discussion with my counterparts from key line ministries, among others, the Ministry of Environment, National Disaster Management Agency, support from UNICEF and partners, in order to build consensus on a concept of child-centered climate change adaptation, referred to as APIFA in our language, in Bahasa Indonesia. This program is an interministerial initiative. It has support from the highest level of government. It is aligned with the decentralized model of Indonesia. Over 300 districts and cities out of 514 districts and cities have adopted the model, and importantly, the key indicators of children's vulnerabilities account for direct action towards the 5-year development plans, SDGs, and the Sendai Framework. In Indonesia, we are exploring ways to mainstream child-centered climate change and disaster risk assessment at various levels within existing programs and with the support of various development partners such as UNICEF. For example, at the individual level, we provide support for children forums around the country, started from village level, sub-district, district, and city up to the province and national levels to raise awareness on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, to empower children, both as pelapor, it means rapporteurs, and as agents of change. So here we do have many children as champions. At the family level, there are obvious links with the Family Resilient Program, among others, done through Family Learning Center, in which we build at the province and district levels. At the school level, we promote school-based programming, such as the Safe School Initiative, which is coordinated by the Ministry of Education. And also, this Safe School Initiative is a part of Child Friendly Schools program that our ministry and Ministry of Education coordinated and developed together with 13 ministries. At the neighborhood, community, and spatial level, we have clear links with the Resilience Village, Child-Friendly Village, and Child-Friendly District and City programs. We receive implementation support from NGO partners, as well as from private sectors and the local community, and also our NGO partners, such as the Children in a Changing Climate Coalition, consists of Wahana Visi, Plan International, Save the Children, Child Fund, and UNICEF at various levels. A critical part of the mainstreaming process is the involvement of relevant stakeholders. When referring to inclusion, we are talking about the ethics of meaningful participation of children. Children have the rights to be listened to freely express their views on all matters that affect them, and to freedom of expression, thought, association, and access to information. They have the right to protect it and participate without discrimination. In Indonesia, various civil society organizations support the Safe School programs led by Ministry of Education. This program also linked with the Regional Asian Safe School Initiative, or ASSI network partners. Children participate to risk assessment according to the school safety pillars. For example, pillars number 3 relates to games and school plays, using localized approaches integrated disaster risk reduction messages. Mainstreaming risk assessment as a basis for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction at various levels is the current objective of this phase, which is not without its challenges. I wish to reflect on some of these challenges with questions to you, my ministerial counterparts, and development partners as the duty bearers and young people as the rights holders. How do we ensure that risk assessment at these various levels is based on participatory approaches to ensure sustainability? How do we align our message and speak to the diverse interests of stakeholders whose buy-in is essential? How do we ensure that no one falls between the gaps, that no one is left behind? I look forward to our discussion today. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lenny. She told about children, young people, access to school, school-based program, 5 years development plan, awareness on risk reduction preparedness, access to information and all this. Thank you again. Now, I would request Ms. Mary Jack to share her thoughts on this important issue. Ms. Mary.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am very pleased to speak on behalf of more than 4,000 women in Vanuatu whose voices has never been heard. These women who stand with me and has been affected by many challenges. I would like to say that I'm going to speak on their behalf this evening. I did not complete my education because I am a girl. So my parents stopped me not to go to school on behalf of my brothers and sisters to help them raise school fees to further the education of other brothers and sisters. I was forced to get married very early because I was afraid of arranged marriage by my parents. I have children when I was very young. In the village where I live, we have no electricity. We have no water supplies. We have no clinics and no schools. I married very early. Unfortunately, my husband died in 2010 and left me with my 3 children. In 2015, Cyclone Pam struck the island. We have 83 islands in Vanuatu, and when we heard about the cyclone, it starts from the northern part of the island and sweep down to the southern part of the island. My island was mostly affected by this cyclone. We were left with no shelter, no food, no water. And the schools were all damaged. In the community where I live, we are governed by a chief, a male chief, and in that community, I have no right to vote for someone or a candidate which I like to vote for. I have no right to speak in public. I have no right to attend meetings because I am a woman. That night after the cyclone, I keep my children close to me because we don't have shelter. I try to seek support from the communities around me, but all of us has the same problem as I am and my children. Few days after, one of my sons called me and said, "Oh, Mom, you have a message on your mobile phone," which I could not read the message from the phone. And I said, "Can you read that message to me?" And he said, "Yes, Mom." So he read the message to me. The message was from ActionAid Australia in partnership with the government of Vanuatu through the Department of Women's Affairs. And they said they have provided a space for women to come together and share their stories on how they will work together to find solutions in time of disaster. I told my children to come close to me so I could seal a promise not to tell other people in the community that I am going to this meeting. I have made up my mind to go to this meeting. Because if someone in the community knows that I am going to this meeting, it will result in a punishment. They will call me and take me to the community meeting where they will ask me to explain. So my children keep this secret. I wake up very early in the morning. I take another road to hide to this meeting. And when I want to return back home, I wait for the dark to fall so nobody sees me coming back home. When I arrive at home that night, my children came and said, "Mom, what have you learned from this meeting?" And another son said, "Mom, but it's my birthday tonight." And I look at him and I cried because I don't have any present to give to my son. But I tell them, I have learned many things in this meeting. I have learned the rights to speak out. I have learned that I will not remain silent again about the problems that are affecting us. This meeting was about the community-based protection rights that I went through, and I learned about my rights. Now I want to tell you, my sons, that even though I don't have present to give you, I have no gift to give you on your birthdays, but I have learned something, that I have the right as a human being to live and enjoy this life. I want to celebrate tonight that I have moved beyond that barriers to a meeting for the first time in my life. I am here today to call at a global platform for disaster risk reduction to send a very clear message for all the women from Vanuatu or in Vanuatu to the governments, UN agencies, humanitarian actors, that women from communities like mine want to be part of decision-making in disaster response. Women are active agents for change in DRR. We need support. We need to participate in all decision-making. It is not sufficient to just consult us. We want space on the table. And we want governments must ensure that we have meaningful participation. and recognize leadership of women in a local to national TRL strategies. Thank you.
Just now, we heard the never heard voice of Vanuatu, heart-touching narration of Cyclone 2015, firm commitment for better life of women and children, and urge to support Vanuatu. Thanks a lot, Ms. Mary Jack, Action Aid Vanuatu. Now, I would go on my left, right and left. I'm doing right and left. To Mr. Carlos Caesar to share his perspective, especially able person. Carlos.
Hello? Yes. Mis primeras palabras van a ser en español porque quiero honrar a toda nuestra gente de esta tierra. Saludos a todos mis hermanos de América. Now, I would try to summarize some ideas that I consider that are very key points when we are talking about disability, inclusive the IDR, and other things that we believe have to raise a conscious. But first, my words are not going to be the ones I meant, because I want to say something deeply from my heart now that we have Miss Mary Jack here. The gift you bring to your family is the greatest one. You are giving freedom for the world. You are a gift for all us. Now I want to refer to many things, and I would start from something that I really want to say also from the bottom of my heart. As you know, I came here from Chile, just in the very end of the world, a country that faced a lot of natural disasters and many, many things. We have so many earthquakes that from time to time, we don't even call them earthquakes. We say tremors. Nothing that is, well, you have something that is just above 6 Richter degree, we say, it seems that there is a tremor. And if you have just something bigger than this, from 7 to 7.5, I guess, we really start saying, prepare yourself. Probably it's going to get worse. It's something that could be an earthquake. Why should I say this? My country is so beautiful, but make you daft in the sense that we have tsunamis, earthquakes, fires. If not, we have floods. If we don't have floods, we have dry seasons. If we have this, we have snow in a part, a desert in another. It's kind of complex. But we learn from our mistakes, and we are learning from many things, getting us stronger. So I want to congratulate someone that is here, that is a real example of resilience and how to do things. I want to say thanks to the National Director of the National Emergency Offices that here, General Toro. Please say hello to everyone. He's over there. Because this man is helping to make my country a fair country for people with disabilities. That's what we call to change the world. Beauty worlds are not going to change it. Action things. The things we said must be follow up by our actions. This is the third thing that I want to say with my heart, and then I want to talk to you with my brain. I want to thank Bangladesh, especially because of the Dhaka Declaration, that I had the marvelous opportunity to work with you people there, saying that Bangladesh is making a worldwide example, and Dhaka Declaration is a milestone for a better world, safer for everyone, setting a standard. So this is my sincere homage to Bangladesh people. I believe that, well, you will find in me always a friend. So a big, big applause for Bangladesh people. Now comes the technical staff. When we are talking about people with disabilities, we have to be very clear about what we are talking about. Most people tend to believe that people with disabilities are separated from the rest of the world. But a person with a disability can be a child, can be a woman, an elderly, can be a person with a PhD or a person that has no opportunity in their life to get into school. We are everywhere, we are part of everything. Sometimes due to this, we tend to be, we are kind of invisible for society. Imagine that nowadays we don't have statistical data about what happened with us in an emergency. We are this variable that is not taken into account. And we are supposed to be 15% of the global population according to the first World Report about disabilities from the World Health Organization. So now that we have here the director of this agency that counts us how many people are we in the world, saying in a short way, because it's more complex than that, we could say that if we cross information, we would have that we are more than 1 billion people living with any kind of disability. So are we doing something related to have these statistics? Yes, we're doing. That's why we have the terminology and also indicators, technical group working, helping the UN. But till now, we don't have any single country, till I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that is implementing it right now in a political staff. So the thing is that we need to know who we are, where we are, and what's happening to us. We have a lot of data, but we are not crossing it. So the thing is that more than having new indicators, the thing is that we have to have more proficiency in the way we are using data, the way we are having baselines, and the way we are planning in the territories. I want to say something, I want to say it out loud. If something is good for me, is safe for me, it's going to work for you, surely. So we are the living indicators of how good the disaster risk reduction are. But the thing is that when you are living as the part of the most endangered group, because we have been denied many things through history, we can have just two options. To make it just, to start crying about this, so, oh, it's that bad. Or we can start supporting things. So here are the things I want to really say. We are contributing, producing knowledge. People with disabilities are no longer the ones in need, are the ones that are needed. We are not vulnerable. We have been vulnerated. That is different. We want a very good approach. We want to be part of it. And I want to make a special offer symbolizing through my own disabilities. As you can see, my limbs are incomplete. But in order to change the world, here they are, my hands to make it happen. Thanks.
Change the world. Dhaka Declaration, disabilities, technical group, disaster groups, all these are the intervention of Mr. Kaiser. So, an affectionate mother like Mary and a committed, loving brother like Kaiser can really change the planet. Now, I would request Mr. Rafael Aboino, External Advisor, UN Habitat, Youth Advisory Board of Kenya.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, co-chairs, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely excited to be here. And I think this is a very important working session discussing inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. Although it comes at an end, I think it's still extremely important. And coming from Kenya, a country of marathoners, we always say no matter how many laps you take, the last lap is always the most important. So I believe that this working session, although it comes at the end, I think it's the most important working session. And so we must clap for ourselves for being here. Secondly, I also want to thank UNISDR, the Regional Office for Europe, for making this possible, for facilitating and actually enabling this session. Let us give them a round of applause. I'm supposed to talk about youth, data, policy, and technology in my presentation, and I quickly want to mention a few things. One is that inclusiveness is critical in our effort to reduce disaster risks and reinforce resilience. Inclusive, people-centered DRR should be a top priority for government and other agencies and all actors who are involved in DRR. Like we've been reminded, no one should be left behind. And most importantly, I think youth must be recognized as critical stakeholders to support the implementation of the Sendai Framework. Let me remind us that if there are no youth in DRR, there is nothing. There is no future. Youth are critical change agents at the present and in the future. I also believe that active citizens, especially youth engagement in DRR at all levels, is crucial for achievement of Sendai Framework goals. But youth are not just part of DRR as victims or a burden or people facing a problem. Youth are part of DRR as people with enormous potential. Youth represent dynamism, they represent the energy, they represent the creativity that we need. And it is the former Secretary General of the United Nations who once said that a society that fails to tap into the creativity and the energy of its young people will not progress. It will be left behind. And so by excluding youth, we are losing out on the freshness, we are losing out on the energy, we are losing out on the creativity that we need to be able to engage more effectively in DRR. Indeed, we need to tap young people's imagination. We need to tap their creativity. We need to tap their talent if truly we are to engage in DRR. And personally, I'm a believer that we cannot just talk and we cannot wait. Like we are told, change does not wait for next time or the next person. We are the change that is needed. And I think young people who are part of this realize that truly we are the change that is needed to be able to address the challenges that we are facing. A few years ago, I met the former head of UNISDR, Margarita, in Morocco. That time I was not involved in DRR. And after our presentation, I walked to her and asked her, what can young people do to help in the conversation, but also in practical actions related to DRR? And she told me, perhaps you could talk to the regional office. I think we could find a way of making sure that we engage young people. And truly, when I discussed with when I went to the regional office and talked to them, they told me it's a great idea. How can we engage young people? And we founded what we call the Disaster Risk Reduction Africa Youth Network, which brought together young people from across the continent who were doing amazing work on different aspects of DRR. And I think continuously UNISDR has supported this group in one way or another. And today young people are not just bystanders, they are not silent recipients, they are not just beneficiaries, they are slowly becoming stakeholders in DRR. And I think that is what is required. Young people cannot just be part of the menu. young people must be part of the decision-making platform, which for me is extremely important. On public policy, I think we need public policies that are robust when it comes to DRR, because public policy provide a solid foundation and a framework for planning, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of some of the ideas that we have. And so we must continue pushing for robust public policies when it comes to DRR. On data, I think data is important because with data, we can measure impact, we can check progress, and we can ensure accountability. And so again, we must also focus on data, disaggregated data in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of disability, in terms of mobility. It is very important that we have data. On technology, I think we must make technology work for us when it comes to DRR. We are dealing with a generation that is more focused on technology. We are the first generation to experience the high-speed technology that we are experiencing. I think technology is not an end in itself, but it is an important enabler. And so we must make sure that we utilize it in trying to solve some of the problems. And lastly, I think we must make use of partnerships. I think for us to be able to achieve the goals set out in Sendai Framework or SDGs or even Paris Agreement, we must work together. And there's an African saying that says that if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to go far, walk with other people. And I think as young people, we want to work together with the DRR community to make sure that we get far. Thank you so very much.
So thanks, Mr. Rafael. He mentioned about inclusiveness, enormous potential of youth's change, and all we know, everything changes, and only change is constant. Public policy, data, accountability, technology, and partnership. Thanks again. So, dear participants, we have heard from our panelists their discussions. Now, allow us to go into a little deeper. We both co-chair will try to do this together. First, I would request co-chair to start asking questions so that we can have further views from our panelists.
Thank you. We thought that we would just do a brief round for each panelist to give 1 minute of your personal perspective on 2 questions. And I will ask the first one, which has to do with public policies and programs, both at the national and local level. And the question is, and we'll start with Mr. Carlos, are public policies, programs, and practices currently promoting inclusiveness? And can you give an example if the answer is yes? And if the answer is no, what is needed to change to motivize and incentivize more inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction? Mr. Carlos.
The answer is yes. And what to be very simple, I will give one example that is happening in Chile. We have, apart from the National Emergency Office, we have the National Disability Service. One is called ONEMI, the other one is called SENADIS, for its acronym in Spanish. They understood that people with disabilities are not a different population, although we have different needs probably in some aspects. So they made all the information that ONEMI is sending to the public, to all the Chileans, they make it accessible for deaf people and have some other standards. So it's a very good start because it's showing that it's something that is for everyone, and that's what inclusion means. So this is my example, and would say that we are going deeper because many other things need to be done in this way.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Appreciate that. Please, Honorable Deputy Minister.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Based on our experience in Indonesia, very important if all ministries as well as local governments, private sectors, and including children and youth working together, and we have to have a kind of a strong coordination starting from the top level up to the local levels. And in doing this, I think it's very important to raise awareness and to do a capacity building from all partners. So the climate change adaptation and disaster risk reductions become the, the national agenda and mainstreaming into all our programs. So no one left behind, including the people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Same question for you, Mr. Rafael.
Yes and no. Yes, because now if you look at, for example, Africa, there is a requirement that countries must establish, or rather formulate national youth policies. And I think that for me is a great progress and great achievement. There's also a requirement that all government programs must integrate or rather recognize youth, including DRR policies and platforms that are established. Youth are required. We've made progress, but I still believe that a lot more needs to be done. For example, I think we need to move away from just talking about numbers to bringing out real stories, real faces when it comes to disaster. I think the reporting is still so focused on numbers than the real stories, and I think we can do a lot more in that regard.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Mary, the question is, are public policies, programs, and practices promoting inclusiveness or not? And please give us an example.
Sorry. Women and I think women and women's organizations need to be included in the decision making process on DRR and resilience building. As an example, there are many policies that women are not involved and they don't know how to implement it. So if they are included in the basis of consultation and included in the decision of the process, they will understand and play an important role in the community.
Thank you very much. And back to you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, panelists. As I committed earlier, that we have one discussant, remote discussant, but unfortunately, Mr. Lofteam, he is facing problem in connecting, but we will not disappoint you. Here on this floor, we have one discussant from Philippines. So I would request friend from Philippines.
Good morning, everyone from the Philippines. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It is the global platform for the disaster risk reduction in Cancun, Mexico. It's a great pleasure to be here right now. And I would like to say that I am the voice of those who cannot speak. I am the eyes of those who cannot see. Our goals in this disaster risk reduction is to make sure that the rights of the persons with disability will be given importance. We would like to raise awareness of the society, to change the perception of the people of disability. We would like to give our emotions and feelings towards those things that matters too much for us. We would like to give importance to the policies that has been given by our governments, but there is only 99% policy and only 1% implementation. I've been here in my local level. I'm part of the national level of the Open Government Partnership in my country, but the problem is there is very little implementation at the grassroots level. Is a very hard thing to do. So I would like to suggest in this committee that we should survey the living conditions of people with disability and have accurate data for awareness raising and review the existing laws to eventually render its full potential so that they will be given the rights and privileges that they have. We don't want to beg anymore. We want the rights of the persons with disability in the world. I hope that would give you a great opportunity to help us here. And I know during disasters, we were the ones who are susceptible to such disaster. And we want us to be we want people to give the importance to us, especially to those who cannot speak, to those who cannot hear, and to those who cannot express themselves. So thank you very much for this platform, for giving us the rights or the quality of time to talk to you guys right now, because it is very important that our voices be heard. It's not what is happening here is very, very beautiful, but what's happening in reality is far-fetched. So we would like to ask your full support to give a very strong foundation in the grassroots level, the regional and the national level, and we will be willing to be with you in the planning table all the time. So that is my point. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to the Nippon Foundation, the Institute on Disability and Public Policy, and everybody here who's present. And have a pleasant afternoon or morning to all.
So thanks, friend from Philippines. Technology brings us together, wherever, maybe either in Washington or Philippines. So thank you. Thanks a lot for panelists and discussant for their insight on the challenges and opportunities on inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction. I'm sure many in the audience wish to contribute to the discussion with questions and interventions. I now hand over to my co-chair, Dr. Natalia Kanem, to facilitate the discussion between the audience and the panel. Dr. Natalia.
Thank you so much. Very exciting afternoon so far, and we realize that there is a lot of wisdom in this room, experiences that you may wish to share, or more understanding of the amazing perspectives that our distinguished panelists represent. So now we would like to invite you to participate in the discussion. And if you would like to take the floor to make a comment or to ask a question, please indicate who you are and if there's a particular panelist that you wish to respond. Moreover, we have a timer, and at 2 minutes, I will raise my hand and I will ask you to stop talking at the 2-minute point so that we can try and share as much as well as to get the responses in time. So let's get started. And I believe your microphones are at your seat so that you can just speak from there. And I see you in front of me. Thank you.
Hello. Hi there. My name is Erica Bauer, and I'm here with the United Nations Refugee Agency. First, I'd just like to thank the panelists for what was truly the most passionate presentation and the heart of this entire meeting, so thank you. Inclusive and people-centered disaster risk reduction also involves including and recognizing displacement, persons at risk of disaster displacement, but also persons already displaced, refugees, internally displaced persons, and stateless persons, and migrants, amongst others. We would like to call to all those present at this conference to ensure that disaster risk reduction, disaster response, and recovery programs incorporate human rights standards and principles, including non-discrimination. In the case of disaster displacement, evacuation, and planned relocation, we need to ensure that specific protection and assistance needs of children, women, older persons, persons with disabilities, Indigenous communities, and marginalized groups are identified and addressed in preparedness and response planning. As we've heard today, these groups are on the front lines of disasters and also the front lines of disaster displacement. These issues are interconnected fundamentally. Displaced persons should not be left behind in preparedness and in efforts to build back better. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the intervention. The gentleman in red.
I would like to make more of a comment than a question.
Sorry, can you please identify yourself and just raise your hand? I'm having trouble locating you.
I'm here at the back.
Okay, I see you now. Yeah.
I am Grace Burgos. I'm a registered nurse with a PhD background. This is more of a comment than a question. I had experience responding during the Typhoon Haiyan, and I learned greatly from that it is not just the responsibility of the healthcare providers to be reactive, but everybody can be involved. So in the academic level, I felt that disaster reduction awareness should start even from the lowest grade level, age appropriate. So we are in the verge of making pop-up books for elementary kids or kindergarten kids so that they will already have an understanding. Regulatory boards can also help, meaning professional regulation agencies can implement disaster risk reduction concepts. High schools, so meaning to say if you are in the academy, if you are a teacher, implement that. So the educational system has a very big role. If you are a business entrepreneur, then implement that to your employees. So this is a collaborative effort, not just by one, and it is better to be proactive than reactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much and well stated. The gentleman in red at the front.
Vale. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy Cristiano Vargas, soy de Brasil y yo trabajo como bombero voluntario y también con la protección civil local. Bueno, la pregunta, no sé si es una pregunta, estoy apenas a hablar con los amigos Kaiser. En primer lugar, enhorabuena a tu trabajo, enhorabuena lo que desarrolla la América Latina, Sudamérica, todo. Y gustaría de saber, porque nosotros como bomberos tenemos mucha dificultad, principalmente cuando tenemos que hacer una búsqueda de personas con discapacidad. Y es un problema. No es solo un problema puntual, es un problema general. Entonces, yo gustaría de saber si, ya que tú ya has pasado que 15% de la población mundial tiene esta dificultad de movilidad y que nosotros tenemos que cambiar ideas para que podamos con el tiempo mejorar. Pregunto a ti, si te puedas me ayudar también. ¿Cómo hacemos, dónde buscamos ideas nuevas? Si tú tienes alguna dirección para que nosotros podamos hacer cada vez mejor este trabajo a vosotros y con certeza y seguramente a nosotros podremos ayudar más y más personas no solo que de sillas de ruedas, pero que de forma general. Por favor, gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Y esto, pregunta muy importante. Decidimos dar la palabra a usted y después a Rafael para contestar, si está bien, ¿no? Bueno, gracias.
En primer lugar, quiero decir que gran parte del conocimiento que requieren ya lo tienen, por cuanto ustedes son bomberos, son expertos en rescate, en la labor de extinción de siniestros, de incendios y en la colaboración con los demás organismos. Si bien es cierto, existen algunas metodologías que distintas instituciones estamos desarrollando, yo tengo algunos estudios en la materia, no soy la única institución que lo tiene, pero claramente mi material está a tu disposición y al de todo que así lo quiera. Una de las mejores cosas es reunirse con las propias organizaciones locales de personas con discapacidad en el lugar donde ustedes operan, porque van a encontrar que no es solo un tema de la discapacidad en sí, sino de los contextos ambientales. No es lo mismo un rescate en una zona densa urbana que cuando se hace rescate, por ejemplo, en una zona rural. Para terminar mi intervención, entonces, digo de que tenemos que tomar en cuenta los contextos, los saberes ya establecidos y las alianzas con aquellos que pueden complementarlas, y enteramente a tu disposición.
Muchas gracias. Y también comienza con hacer la pregunta y pensarlo en avance, como usted ha indicado. Rafael va a contestar también.
Yeah, I think for me, just to add a small point that, yeah, you're experts, but I think one of the best ways to engage in DRR is to work with communities. And so I think one of the things that you could do is to engage with communities, try to empower them in terms of providing them, helping them to develop certain levels of capacity to be able to deal with disaster. And I think that will reduce the enormous work that you have. So I think strengthening community's capacity is extremely important.
And if I may, I would also add that posing the question is where it starts, but there's experience around the world, and this could be something where the Disaster Risk Reduction Platform, Mexico 2017, can take this as an advice that we would give, so that if there are suggestions for firefighters or any of the other civil actors, that we start to cohere and to publish that information, share it in the various languages so that we can all access it. The floor belongs to you. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Godfred, and I represent the older people group here. Thank you very much to the distinguished panel for their very insightful comments and also very powerful personal stories. Very empowering indeed. You know, it's a session on inclusion and people-centered DRR. And I hope you all recognize that the panel itself doesn't represent all the population groups. There are many groups that are still not there. And the older people are nearly 1 billion right now, and they're the fastest growing population group. And by very soon, by 2030, they will be almost doubling. So that kind of population group, we are talking very serious over here. And the other statistical information that I want to provide, in Katrina, in Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and also in the Nepal earthquake, between 50 and 70% of the people who died are 60 years and over. So you see the number of people who die, the highest percentage is among the 60 plus. But there is very little focus on them in the DRM. Whenever I talk to anyone about older people, they say, oh yeah, they're vulnerable, they're weak, they're sick, they're poor. Nobody talks about their resourcefulness, their capacities, their experience. Do we think about talking to older people, involving them? They bring value they bring experience, they bring the historical knowledge, and they bring so many more things to make your DRM program very, very strong. And what we are trying to promote is the active role of older people in any DRM program that you plan. And my question to the panel, distinguished panel here is, how can the international community and UNISDR promote that older people's knowledge and experience is not just consulted, but that they are active partners in all the disaster risk reduction planning, implementation, and the monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a comment, and there were elements of a question. So as we give the panelists the final word at the end, you may wish to incorporate a reply. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay?
Sí, soy Hugo Hernández Bocanegra de México, Consultoría Social Integral. Somos una asociación civil que tenemos un enfoque no discriminatorio de la reducción del riesgo de desastres. Para ello coincidimos con las voces de los expertos, de los ponentes representantes gubernamentales. Me llama mucho la atención el mensaje de la Oficina de Refugiados de Naciones Unidas en esta visión de incluir a todos sin discriminación, de pensar en los adultos mayores, en las personas con capacidades diferentes, en niñas, niños y adolescentes, pero también en poblaciones indígenas, migrantes y en situación de calle. En la Ciudad de México impulsamos a través de varias entrevistas en medios de comunicación que la alcaldía local estableciera una primer guía, protocolo, es una guía general para personas con discapacidad. Quiero compartir esta reflexión, pero también hacer un llamado a fortalecer la inclusión social dentro de la reducción de riesgo de desastres para que nadie sea excluido y podamos llevar a nuestros países las mejores prácticas, como la labor que realiza Carlos Kaiser desde ONG Incluyente. Y es lo que tengo que decir. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Well, first of all, thanks for the floor. My name is Marcelo Torres. I am a Mexican medical student, and I come in representation of United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. Thanks to all of you for the words and motivation for children and youth to keep up working as hard as we're trying to do so far. We're really encouraged by and happy to hear all of your words. I'll ask a question to Mr. Rafael. Which should be United Nations' next steps to promote actively inclusiveness and to improve participation for children and youth on disaster risk reduction? Thank you.
I think we'll collect a couple more questions because we had 3 and 4, and then we'll move to that side.
Thank you very much.
Yo quisiera llamar su atención.
Distinguished speakers, my name is Kyoshi Murakami, representing the city of Rikuzen, Takata, Japan, which was also faced as a disaster with tsunami 2011. Through that, our experience, that somebody here in this floor mentioned, and the one thing about the firefighters issues, we lost the 60 firefighters during the tsunami because they actually really forced themselves into to save the people. So not only firefighters, but also civil servants as well, because they were also supporting to the elder people to carrying up to the higher level. So the question here is that whether or not we need to put a standard on the certain level up to the maximum level, or at least, for instance, like if the tsunami comes in, if we know that when this tsunami reaching to that point, up to when each individual of those people should be serving to the people. In other words, you have to protect your life to save yourself also. That is one of the issues that we faced during the tsunami. So it's the same thing to any type of disasters case.
Yes.
How much that you can serve to the people. There should be some kind of standardization in the international community, I think. That's probably you can come up with as a council sometimes later. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for making the point. Because of time, we want to respect your time. We're going to have 3 more comments. Yourself, this lady, and this gentleman that's waving. After that, the panel will respond and we'll close because we're getting a little close to time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por el espacio. Me llamo Rodrigo Garibay, pertenezco al Centro Nacional de Prevención de Desastres aquí en la Ciudad de México, en Ciudad de México, y particularmente llevo más de 10 años respondiendo a situaciones de desastre y emergencia como voluntario en la Cruz Roja y en otras instituciones, además de mi gobierno. Y he notado un fenómeno muy particular que tiene que ver con la inclusión de la juventud en los mecanismos de prevención de riesgo de desastre. Y es que cuando trabajamos con los jóvenes, los empoderamos y los capacitamos, si se dan en un ambiente separado de aquellos que son sus cuidadores, al momento de una situación de emergencia, las jerarquías impuestas socialmente entre padres e hijos impiden que se dé una respuesta, aun cuando sea el joven el que sea la persona epistémicamente competente para la respuesta. Entonces, en las recomendaciones internacionales que al menos yo he estado revisando, me he podido dar cuenta que de algún modo parece desligada la actividad que hacemos con la juventud de aquella que tenemos que hacer con los padres y cuidadores. Entonces, solo llamo la atención al panel en ese tema.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. The woman who's raised, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Esma Gumberide. I represent here, and I am with ASB here in the GP 2017. I just had a couple of comments regarding disability inclusion in DRR. The very first thing is because if you ask me, I'm myself blind, but if you ask me personally, okay, what should be done and how can we include people with disabilities and what specifically should they do in this or that emergency situation, I might not be exactly able to tell you right now on the spot. And so might not be other people with disabilities. So it's very important to just include them, to let them participate on all the levels of decision-making or preparedness, all the modelings and things like that, so that they themselves could figure out what is the best way, what is their individual plan, how to accommodate their needs the best, because they are the ones who know their capacities and needs, and everybody has individual level of autonomy and different level of autonomy of functioning, and therefore different capacities, experiences, skills, and needs. So it's very important to figure out what to do and how to include people with disabilities just to get them involved. And then ask them how this or that could have been done better.
Thank you.
Because in this process, they could help themselves and figure it out.
Thank you. Excellent point. Thank you. Last comment, please, before we...
Muy buenas tardes. David López, del Movimiento Asociativo de Personas con Discapacidad de Nicaragua. Yo siento que en varios comentarios todavía se percibe cierta exclusión En mi caso, hacia las personas con discapacidad, porque he escuchado reiteradamente la frase, a la hora de cualquier eventualidad, es un problema trabajar con las personas con discapacidad. Y nosotros no queremos seguir siendo el problema. Bueno, problema porque así lo ven desde afuera. Nosotros no somos problema, somos parte de la solución. Y por eso, a las personas con discapacidad y adultos mayores, se nos debe tener como aliados estratégicos y desde Naciones Unidas se puede influir en nuestros gobiernos para que esto vaya siendo realidad. No queremos seguir siendo sujetos pasivos, propiamente receptores de una determinada atención. Queremos que se nos respete y reconozca el derecho a ser protagonistas. Ustedes como gobierno tendrán la fuerza, los recursos, la cobertura, pero las personas con discapacidad y los adultos mayores tenemos el cómo. Por eso debemos fortalecer el binomio Estado, sociedad civil para construir la inclusión. Y al compañero distinguido Carlos Kaiser, solo le pido brevemente si ahonda más en la frase que expresó, que cualquier cosa que sirve a las personas con discapacidad sirve a todos.
Thanks to all the participants. Very good comments. Move over to the co-chair, please.
Thanks a lot. We see interest from the floor, but unfortunately, we could not allow all the interested persons from the floor. We need to conclude the session.
The panelists. We're in a dilemma because of time, so I think we'll allow the panelists to give a closing minute each. And then for those of you who can stay, we have a summary that we will provide in writing after the fact. But for those of you who would like to hear the summary, you're welcome to stay. But we'll close after the panelists. Yeah.
So before we put the recommendation, I would request our panelists to take 1 minute each for responding the questions or recommendations or suggestions from the floor. Just from my right, from my left.
Yeah, I think all public policies, programs have to promote inclusiveness and also involve all ages, starting from children up to elderly, and especially for children, for children, preschool children, we can go through the family. And public policies, programs, and practices also need to change to motivate and incentivize to more inclusive and people-centered to disaster risk reduction. I think government, NGO, private sectors, all partners have to collaborate together, and this is very critical. And the government also have to provide capacity building to all people, especially the community, and this has to make sure that all people are covered. Of course, including the people with disability. So inclusiveness is very critical here, working together, strong coordination, and raising awareness and capacity building from national up to the local level to make sure that no one left behind. Thank you.
So thank you. Mr. Kaiser.
I would say it as fast as I can in a minute. The thing is, when I said that everything that could help a person with disability would serve to a person that, to everyone, is because accessibility is a key issue here. And all the measurements, for instance, if we're talking about blind people, you need to have no obstacles for instance, in a road or in aisles. But people that can see tend to put things in dangerous places. So if we take this measure, thinking first of a blind person, then all of us are saved. Second, we are talking about here building capacity and participation. As my dear friend mentioned, we really need the expertise that people with disabilities and elderly people that sometimes tend to be the same group, sometimes we double counted it, because when you get older, you probably would get disabilities. We need to listen to their voice. In my town, we start a program that older people start working with younger generation, telling many things that are needed. And finally, I would say, talking about the tsunami and things that Mr. from Japan said, we have something similar in Chile, you know. The thing is, if we remove the barriers, we would shorten the time and probably all of us would get out of there in time. Thanks.
So thanks. Ms. Mary.
So much for allowing me to speak to you today, and thank you for listening to the voices of women who has never been heard. I have never imagined that I would be in Mexico to speak today. But I am here on behalf of the women whose voices has never been heard. And we refuse to be silent. Thank you.
So, Mr. Rafael.
Yeah, just picking up from where Mary left is that young people, children and youth are not silent recipients. I think we must realize that children and youth's participation and leadership in DRR is extremely important. And just responding to the question on how best we can ensure, the United Nations can ensure that children and youth are involved, I think UN has been making progress in terms of children and youth inclusion. And I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, especially when it comes to DRR. I think there's need for a robust program that is well facilitated, that is well supported, that is well coordinated, that is representative, and that is going to address the issues of youth, children and youth in DRR, so that it is not spontaneous, it is not sporadic. I think constant and consistent and a well-coordinated program for children and youth is timely, it is important, and I think we should establish it under UNISDR. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much. If we summarize very briefly, this working session highlighted the importance of understanding the risks of children and youth when developing national strategies, but at the same time to build on their capabilities. Then, achieving inclusion for all requires a multi-action system approach, building knowledge and skill, changing attitude and belief system, and promoting inclusive governance. And last, the type of data, innovative practices needed to measure and report on risk reduction, including youth in disaster risk reduction. Now, I would request co-chair, Dr. Natalia, to make her brief summary recommendations.
Thank you. To add, the health, the protection, the education, income-generating activities underpin sustainable empowerment of people at the community level, including women and youth, and the impacts of disasters for people whose work goes largely unnoticed needs to be quantified. So apropos of the data point, a better understanding in terms of how do we encourage community responsive policies and services that encourage, for example, women's voices and women's leadership in disaster risk reduction going forward, as Mary has so eloquently put it. And then finally, the Sendai Framework speaks to continual monitoring and continual re-evaluation. So in protecting the well-being of high-risk communities, the collection as much as the analysis, which came up from the panelists and also from the floor, demands that we look at our data and that it should be disaggregated by age, by gender, by disability, ability, mobility. All of these things are imperative in terms of understanding the impact of inclusive governance and to create an accountability for groups that otherwise would be marginalized. I think there was a lot of power in the discussion in the room this afternoon. We can see that there's an appetite to continue this discussion, and we should look for ways to continue the discussion. I believe that the summary will be part and parcel of the procedure, but certainly I think that we've set a cornerstone for making sure that this is an issue that stays central to prevention as well as to mitigation. Thank you.
So, dear friends, before concluding this session, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all. My understanding is mother like Mary, brother like Kaiser, sister like Lenny, and son like Raphael can change the globe and make the planet more livable than ever for the future generation. I hereby conclude this session. Thank you very much for your time.